In the name of God, most merciful, ever merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Respected sisters, dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Throughout the ages, thinkers, philosophers, historians have given a very special attention to a specific class in society, the demographic class of the youth. The special attention that they have paid to the youth is for multiple reasons. The first one has to do with the actual abilities of the youth in society and how determining it is for a society to have an active class of youth. The second reason is because what the youth represents for the future of a society. The potential and the vision and the dream and the hope of a society is entirely on the shoulders of the youth of today. And so we see that when we go back to the history of thought and the history of societies, we see that there's been a special care and a special attention given to this class in society. Over the past little while, there is a large number of studies that have come out specifically trying to understand and to analyze the role, the effectiveness, the health, so to speak, of the class of the youth in today's world. The majority of these studies have come out in Europe, the United States, and Canada, so generally speaking, we can say in the West. And because we live in the West, I think that they become very relevant to us, as these are very well documented, very well researched pieces of study that are trying to assess how well the class of the youth is doing in general. This is not the time to go in the details of this. There are a lot of studies and they come from different angles. All I'm trying to do is to give a quick overview of the conclusions of these studies from a few aspects. The focus in the past little while has been on two generations. The first generation is called the millennials. Usually those are the people who are born after 1980 up to 2000. The second generation are the Gen Z. The millennials are referred to as Gen Y. The Gen Z, those who are born starting in 1990 all the way to 2010. And there are reasons why a generation is put together and defined in a certain way. There are common traits, things that are happening in society that are common to all these people born during these times. The determining factor, the determining indicator for those who are born in Generation Y, 1980 to 2000, is that this is the first generation that had to live through this major technological shift. They were the first to have to adapt to and accommodate to the huge technological changes that were happening in society. The major distinction between them and Gen Z, the next generation, those who were born in 1990 to 2010, is that Gen Z were born into these technological changes. And so they are called digital natives. They do not know a world where there is no smartphone. And they do not know a world where there is no social media. And they do not know a world where you are not constantly connected to the internet. And there are very specific traits. Those who have studied the history of societies were able to see that there are very specific traits that jump at you when you study this generation. These two generations in general, Generation Z even more. Perhaps by looking at just the name that was given to these two generations, we can already start to see one of these indicators. And both of them are not very positive. The first one, the millennials, they were called the me generation. Me as in short for millennials. But the truth is, what they mean is that there is a strong tendency of only thinking about me. Self-centeredness, narcissism, the world of selfies, the world of entitlement. And this became even more the case with the next generation, Gen Z, who was called the I-Gen, like iPhone and iPad. They were called the I-Gen. Once again, a very clear hint to narcissism, to self-centeredness, to self-entitlement, and so on and so forth. I mentioned this in passing because if you go back to the literature, you will find books upon books trying to show all of this. This is called the narcissism epidemic, or the generation of narcissism, self-centeredness, and so on and so forth. This is one trait, and it's important to keep in mind. Secondly, we're told that there is a major shift that has happened in society, which has led in general, the culture in general, to be very loose with its standards. The standard of being active in the political world, in the financial world, in the business world, has been decreasing steadily. And that's why there are those who have now called this new world we live in as a world of mediocrity, where everything is mediocre, where the standard is not going towards excellence, it's not going up. The standard of what it means to be average is not going towards what is better and higher and superior, it's going to what is lower and more mediocre. And this is affecting the youth even more than it is affecting other classes in society. That's a second conclusion from many studies. A third conclusion from these studies has to do with what has been called the coddling of the mind and the coddling of the personality, based on the idea that the youth especially, people in general, but the youth especially, are extremely frail, fragile, vulnerable creatures who cannot be exposed to anything that they disagree with or that may hurt their feelings. And the moment that happens, they will no longer feel safe. This will injure them forever, and they will be traumatized by it. And so this has been called, this over-reliance, this exaggerated way of seeing the fragility of people has been called safetyism. Going too far in creating safe environments. And the issue here, of course, is that people lose their ability to deal with the real world. They are constantly sheltered while in their youth, and so as they reach adulthood, they do not have the skill set to deal with the real world. No ability to have the resilience, to have the strength, to disagree, to see different points of views, and so on and so forth. And more than that, this generation, as a result of this, has also lost a lot of its critical ability. In some cases, they don't have enough of a critical mind, and in some cases, they can criticize at an intellectual level, but they will not be the ones who revolt or rebel or rise or speak out against something they disagree with. They become very amenable to whatever you need them to do. They want to avoid any confrontation because you have not taught them, as any previous generation has been taught, to deal with life and all of its disagreements and to find a way to disagree and still coexist respectfully. And so this is another tendency. Another one has to do with anything that falls under the category of entertainment and hobbies and so on and so forth, where a lot of what the youth are interested in to pass time, their hobbies and their entertainment today, does not lead in any way, shape, or form to any life skills. People have always interested in things that allow them to rest and chill and relax. But in a lot of cases, in the past, a lot of this led to some sort of life skill. It allowed you better interpersonal skills. You dealt with people. You did things with your body. You had to learn skills that allow you to live in nature, and so on and so forth. A lot of that today is lost, replaced by gaming or sitting in front and watching a show after a show and so on and so forth, that does not really lead to anything that you can later use in life. It's just blind passing of time. All of this is leading to, and these are also studies pinpointing all of this, that today when you look at these two generations, especially Gen Z, iGen, but both Gen Y and Gen Z, there is a severe lack at the intellectual level, there's a severe lack at the physical level, and there's a severe lack at the social level. Intellectually, a lot of this has been attributed to technology, by the way. The constant use of social media and the way technology is produced and consumed today means that you are constantly bombarded by little bits and pieces of information. This means that you don't have enough practice to have a sustained, concentrated attention for a prolonged period of time. You're used to getting exposed to information that lasts 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 30 seconds, as opposed to 45 minutes. You feel restless. Your mind feels scattered. It's too long for you to focus for this long when you're so used to all day, every day in, day out, year in, year out, to only receiving information as little bits and pieces, short clips, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and so on and so forth. There's never any opportunity to have a sustained, concentrated effort intellectually that you can continuously build on for your life. That's intellectually. Physically, I think it is well known. You have every excuse in the world not to move your body. Everything is easy and accessible. You only need a few clicks. And then finally, your ability to deal with the world, your interpersonal skills, your ability to deal with society, all of the milestones of adulthood, all of the milestones that make you into someone capable of dealing with society today are delayed. They're occurring much later in the life of a human being than they were before. And it's not because human beings don't have the capacity. All of this is being delayed. So when you're entering into the world, you're entering with less of a skill set and less with an ability. And when you are entering, you're entering much later than others used to enter in previous generations. Why do we say all of this? First of all, what the conclusion is from all of these studies, they all point to the same thing. Those who are writing these studies, they are saying that our society, they're talking about their society, where we live, our society is in grave danger. We need to do something to change the situation. We're headed in the wrong path. There's something dangerous that's about to happen. Those who are taking over the world, those who are taking over society, do not have what it takes to continuously be able to lead our societies and deal with the problems and issues and catastrophes and disasters and challenges awaiting them. And this is because we failed them as a society. This is what these people are saying. So therefore, we have to change. I am mentioning this for other reasons. This is not a bashing session of the youth. This is so that I know, first of all, that the youth understand that this is being said about them. Because when you hear that these scientists and these thinkers and sociologists and philosophers are saying this about the youth, we have to look at ourselves as the youth and say, how much of this applies to me? 1, 2, 3 of these things, if they apply to me, it means I have to do something differently so that I do not become the stereotype. This doesn't mean that everyone's in this stereotype. Not everyone has these problems. This is the average. Don't be average. Don't become the stereotype. You're a lot better than that. That's one. And two, this is also something for us to know. Us as parents, us as community members, how many in our communities are interested, preoccupied, obsessively, many of them. Thank God for that, to have these people who care so much about the youth. This is great. But we need to understand the reality of the youth today. These are some of the things that are coming out of sociological, philosophical, and other studies. So we have to address them directly in our families and in our communities. That's the first layer. The second layer, and this is in line with our theme. Our theme for this whole series is the truth and our ability to distinguish the truth. Culture has told and culture has created this truth for the youth. This has become the truth of the youth. They are today in a situation where, in one word, maybe we can say they lack the maturity to deal with the world. So let's compare what culture has done and said with what Islam says. Does Islam have a specific view about the youth? What does Islam say about the place of the youth, the maturity of the youth, the responsibilities that the youth can take? Does it have a specific opinion about those things or not? The first thing perhaps that we can start talking about is when we say youth, how do we define it? All of these studies, they are going to give you a specific age. The youth are from this age to that age. There are some ages mentioned in the Quran, not specifically the Quran, we're going to come to the verses of the Quran. In the narrations, there are ages mentioned. The Quran presents the life of a human being differently. In the narrations, we are told when a child is first born, the 7 first years, you give them maximum flexibility so that they enjoy their childhood. And then the next 7 years, you use them as though you would use a servant, so that they learn manners, they learn discipline, and they are in a learning mode constantly. And then the last of those 21 years, the last 7, this is when they become your helper and your assistant and your vizier. They are right there, like an advisor. You use them that way. You respect their opinions, but they are always there as a second in command. So there's a balancing between learning and giving them responsibility, and this prepares them for life. This is mentioned in some of the narrations, and I think that this part is well known. When you go back to our Islamic teachings, however, you see that it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Islam does not want to give ages. Islam does not refer to youth as a specific age. Islam says the life of a human being is made up of 3 main parts, 3 big parts. The first part is weakness. The second part is strength and power. The third part is back to weakness and old age. What we are talking about when we say youth is the second part. Is the part where the human being is in their full capacity and their full strength. There are multiple verses, at least 2 verses of the Holy Quran talking about this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ثُمَّ جَعَلَ مِن بَعْدِ ضَعْفٍ قُوَّةً ثُمَّ جَعَلَ مِن بَعْدِ قُوَّةٍ ضَعْفًا وَشَيْبًا. Right? You're born, you're weak, you're dependent on your parents and people to take care of you in every way. Then you acquire these powers and abilities so that you become more and more strong and powerful in the world until you reach the maximum. And then you start falling back into old age. We don't need numbers for those. This is clear. There's also more clarity around this, where Islam wants to make sure that people don't understand all of this to mean that because a human being physically is starting to lose some abilities, that it means that they stop producing, or that youth is only defined by age or physical strength. We have multiple narrations around this. One of them, I mentioned them quickly. In one of them, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam talks to one of his companions. His name is Sulaiman ibn Jafar al-Nahdi. He comes to the Imam asks him, he tells him, Ya Sulaiman, man al-fata? Who is a fata, Sulaiman? Fata is a term that, generally speaking, anyone who speaks Arabic will say this is the term we use for the youth. Someone who's youthful or young, we say al-fata, a young man. So Imam al-Sadiq is asking this man, he tells him, his companion, he tells him, who's a fata? How do you define a fata? So he says, جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ فَقَالَ لَهُ جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ الْفَتَى عِنْدَنَا الشَّابِ. Very respectful answer. He tells him, we use this term to refer to a young person, a youthful person. فقال عليه السلام أما علمت أن أصحاب الكهف كانوا كلهم كهولا. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam tells him, did you not know that all of the people who went into the cave in hiding, the Imam does not explain it because one of his companions, he knows the story of the Kahf, right? The chapter 18 in the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, talks about these men who go into a cave to hide from the oppression of their time, and they wake up 300 or 309 years later. The Imam tells him, did you not know that all of those who went into the cave were all kuhul? This is a term, by the way, we in Arabic use to mean an older man, kahl. Imam al-Sadiq has another narration in which he tells who is kahl. In the tradition of Ahl al-Bayt, who is kahl? Imam al-Sadiq in that other narration he says, when the man reaches 30 years, he becomes a kahl. And when he reaches 40 years, he becomes a sheikh. These are the terms. Ahl al-Bayt are explaining how they use the terms. So Imam al-Sadiq is saying these men went into the cave, none of them was younger than 30 years old. Okay, so what's the point? The point is the Holy Quran refers to them as إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا فِتْيَةً آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ وَزِدْنَاهُمْ هُدًى. The Quran uses the term fata, young men. They were all over 30. The point being, and the Imam makes a point clear at the end, he says, فَسَمَّاهُمُ اللَّهُ فِتْيَةً بِإِيمَانِهِمْ يَا سُلَيْمَانَ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَاتَّقَى فَهُوَ الْفَتَى. This youthfulness, this young spirit or young age has more to do with how you feel on the inside. Has to do with your passion and internal flame. And the Imam says, this comes from belief in God and remembering the existence of God. God is always present to you. This makes you a fata. In another narration, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, when he describes the believer, he says, تَرَاهُ بَعِيدًا كَسَلُهُ. You see the believer, someone whose laziness is always distant. They don't allow the laziness to come into their lives. دَائِمًا نَشَاطُهُ. Always active, full of energy, consistent energy. This is youthfulness. It's not about a specific age or how your body is. It's the ability to continuously produce and have that flame inside you. In general, when you go to Islamic teachings, there is a huge importance given to this category, this class of people who are the youth. Not only does Islam say that they are great in themselves, these youth, not only does Islam say that they are the future, so focus on your future and the potential and your aspirations and dreams and hopes as a society. There are multiple narrations that we have that clearly state that the youth are actually superior in a lot of ways to everyone else. In ways that we might find surprising, and I don't have time to go through the narrations now. But the headings, I'll mention the headings quickly. Islam recognizes that the youth have superior abilities to learn. That's very clear in many, many narrations. Islam says that the youth have a greater capacity to act based on what they learned. These are two different things. You may know, but your ability to translate your knowledge into action is not always something intuitive to you. The younger you are, the more ability Islam says you have to do this. And this is extremely important in today's world, where perhaps one of the main indicators, main factors in today's world is the pace of change. It's not only that you're able to learn and to learn quickly, it's how able are you able to convert what you learned back into action. Islam says the youth have a greater capacity for that. What else? Islam says that the youth have souls that are more pure, that are more innocent, that are more clean, that are closer to the true human nature, to the fitrah, than people who have lived in this world for longer. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, in one narration we have, one of his companions comes back from a trip. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam asks him, how did you find the people of those lands? How are they? And the companion tells Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, I found very few people interested in the truth. Most people have no interest in the truth. And Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam tells this man, after a discussion, he tells him, عليك بالأحداث فإنهم أسرع إلى كل خير. He tells him, focus on the youth. Why? Because they are always going to be faster, they are going to be quicker towards everything that is good. That's one narration from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. In another narration, the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he says, أوصيكم بالشبان خيرا فإنهم أرق أفئدة. The first thing is, the Holy Prophet says, I ask you to pay closer attention, to take special care of the youth. Why? Because their hearts are more sensitive, more receptive to the truth. And then the Holy Prophet adds, إن الله بعثني بشيرا ونذيرا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent me as a bringer of good news, as a warner. He sent me as a prophet. فحالفني الشبان وخالفني الشيوخ. It is the young people who became my allies and my supporters. And the shuyukh, the older people, they became my opponents, those who rejected my call. And then the Holy Prophet ﷺ ends by saying, ثُمَّ قَرَأَ فَطَالَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْأَمَدُ فَقَسَتْ قُلُوبُهُم. They lived for too long, their hearts became hard. Sometimes we may think this is all theory. These are nice principles in general to learn. Abstract notions, ideas. Let's go to practical examples to see to what extent did Islam actually put this into application, that this was practiced by Islam. I have a few stories. Let's see how much time we have to go through a couple of stories. The first story is that of a man by the name of Attab ibn Asyad. Who is Attab ibn Asyad? The Holy Prophet lived in Mecca. He was born in Mecca, he lived in Mecca. And then he became a messenger and a prophet in Mecca. And then the people of Mecca opposed him. They did everything they can to prevent him from preaching. They did everything they can, in fact, to kill him. Eventually, he leaves Mecca to go to live in Medina al-Munawwara. He remains in Medina al-Munawwara for about 10 years, after the 13 initial years of his preaching in Mecca. Around the 8th year, while he's in Medina, by that time, he has enough supporters, he has enough allies, he is strong enough politically, militarily, to return to his hometown of Mecca. And there is no need for any war then. They see themselves right away that the Holy Prophet and his armies and his strength is too powerful, and so he enters victorious into Mecca. He is now officially the ruler over Mecca. As soon as this happens, and at the same time, a lot of the tribes got together and they started to prepare an army to attack the Holy Prophet ﷺ while he's in Mecca. He's not in Medina. This becomes the Battle of Hunayn. The Holy Prophet cannot stay in Mecca. As soon as he enters Mecca, he has to leave it, leading the army to the Battle of Hunayn. All of this is just background information. What's the point? The point the Holy Prophet has to leave someone in charge of Mecca. He leaves this man, Attab ibn Asyad. So we have in our narrations that the Holy Prophet ﷺ wrote a mission statement to officially appoint him in this position, to tell him, you are now left in charge of Mecca. I want you to lead these people. I want you to perform the prayer and teach these people religion. And if I knew," the Holy Prophet tells him, "if I knew that there was someone who is more capable than you of leading these people and being in this position, I would put him here. But I have chosen you." What happens next? The Holy Prophet leaves Mecca. And at that time, he starts to receive letters from the people of Mecca, telling him, "This man has no experience. He is too young. How can you leave him as our leader?" I don't have time to remind you guys who is still in Mecca. This is a very sensitive, very difficult context. All of the towns around Mecca are looking at Mecca. Mecca is the center of the Arabian Peninsula. Quraysh is in Mecca. The leaders of those who were fighting and trying to kill the Holy Prophet for many years were all still in Mecca. This is not an easy position to be in, to be the leader now in Mecca representing the Holy Prophet, when the Holy Prophet has not had time to establish anything concrete in Mecca yet. And he leaves this man behind. He writes a letter back to them. He writes in the letter, as part, it's a long letter, as part of it he writes, وَلَا يَحْتَجَّ مُحْتَجٌّ مِّنْكُمْ فِي مُخَالَفَتِهِ بِصِغَرِ سِنِّهِ. I do not want to hear any of you objecting and giving as a pretext his young age for disobeying him. And then the Holy Prophet adds, فَلَيْسَ الْأَكْبَرُ هُوَ الْأَفْضَلُ بَلِ الْأَفْضَلُ هُوَ الْأَكْبَرُ. It is not because someone has an older age that they are better. No, the person who is most competent is the one who is better. The Holy Prophet is clearly establishing some principles here. In any case, this man, Attab ibn Asyad at that time, how old is he? You have to dig in history. History says that he was 21 years old. To do all of this, and he remained as the governor of Mecca. This was not a 2-week mission that the Holy Prophet left him on. The Holy Prophet came back from the battles, he went back to Medina. The Holy Prophet could have put anyone else. In fact, history tells us he was very competent at leading in Mecca. He led Mecca very competently throughout the rest of the life of the Holy Prophet. The Holy Prophet passes away year 11. This is year 8. So at least, or almost 3 years, over 2.5 years, he was the governor of the Holy Prophet in Mecca. And then afterwards, when the Holy Prophet passes away, the entire political world changes. This is the first example of the application of the Holy Prophet of these principles. A second story. In the beginning of his mission, the Holy Prophet is in Mecca. He hasn't moved to Medina. The people of Medina start to hear about the Holy Prophet and his religion. They start to get interested in it for its own truth, and because they have a lot of internal issues internally in Medina. Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj, the 2 big tribes in Medina, they are constantly in conflict with each other. They hope, they wish that they could unite, they don't know how. A lot of issues. They're interested in the teachings of the Holy Prophet. A few of their notables, the leaders of their tribes, they come to visit the Holy Prophet while he's in Mecca. He hasn't moved to Medina yet. The Holy Prophet answers their questions. They learn about this religion. They accept it right away. They tell the Holy Prophet, would you please send some of your companions with us so that they teach us this religion and they teach us the Quran. Perhaps others in Medina might be interested in this. The Holy Prophet ﷺ chose a man. I'll read the part. History says, فاختار النبي صلى الله عليه وآله لذلك من بين المسلمين وقتئذ مصعب بن عمير. The Holy Prophet chose a man by the name of Mus'ab ibn Umayr, who deserves his own lectures. Another time, inshallah. وكان شابا في مقتبل العمر. And he was a young man, early in his adulthood. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله لمصعب بن عمير وكان فتى حدثا وأمره رسول الله بالخروج مع أسعد وقد كان تعلم من القرآن كثيرا. So, what does this tell us? The Holy Prophet ﷺ chose Mus'ab ibn Umayr. History says this was a young man. Why did the Holy Prophet choose him? History has given us the reason he was chosen. Of course, we can assume the rest. We can assume that the Holy Prophet is choosing him because he's the most competent to perform this role. But history pinpointed one criteria, one trait of this man. It says he had learned a lot more Quran than anyone else. We spoke about the Quran. This is why the Holy Prophet chooses him. What does he accomplish, Mus'ab ibn Umair? He goes to Medina with them, one man. He goes to Medina with them. He converts all the heads of the tribes in Medina. On a daily basis, he went to visit all the tribes. He worked relentlessly. He converted all the population of Medina into Islam. That's a lot of work. The Holy Prophet has not moved to Medina yet. He's still in Mecca dealing with the mushrikeen. He is the first to have led Salat al-Jama'ah and Salat al-Jumu'ah in Medina. He was the Imam, and when the revelation came that the Muslims are to perform Salat al-Jumu'ah together, the Friday prayer, he is the first one to have performed Salat al-Jumu'ah and Jama'ah in Medina. And this continued for a while. He was extremely competent, huge accomplishments. This companion of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All these results, all this responsibility upon him, we have to go back once again. History said he's a young man. You have to dig in history. How old was Mus'ab ibn Umair when all of this happened? And the Holy Prophet sends him alone. I want each and every one of us to put ourselves in his shoes. He was 18 years old. Mus'ab ibn Umair was 18 years old when he went to Medina and converted all of Medina single-handedly and managed to deal with the heads of the tribes of the Arabs in that world. And there are many other examples. I don't have time to go through the stories. Another example is the well-known story of Usama. The army of Usama ibn Zayd ibn Haritha. The Holy Prophet is on his deathbed. He orders all the Muslims to join the army of Usama ibn Zayd. People came back and they complained to the Holy Prophet. They used a pretext telling the Holy Prophet he's too young. He doesn't have any experience. And the Holy Prophet from his deathbed, he couldn't move. History says he got up angry, having to rely on two men, Imam Ali and Ibn Abbas, or his uncle al-Abbas, to bring him all the way to his pulpit so that he stands on his pulpit angry. And he says, Osama is one of the closest people to me, one of the beloved people to me. Obey Osama. Be kind to Osama and obey Osama. People are complaining about him today. They complained about his father yesterday. And I swear that they were both competent to lead. Where was Osama being sent? What is this army that the Holy Prophet put together on his deathbed? Where was Osama being sent? Osama is being sent to fight the Romans. Perhaps the greatest dynasty of that age, of that time. How old should you be when you go and you lead an army to go fight the Romans, the greatest superpower of your time? Usama ibn Zayd was 18 years old. This is to prove a point. It's one thing to say Islam has theories and ideas and notions and principles. It's another to say when the Holy Prophet says, I relied on the youth to build this religion, these are not empty claims. The Holy Prophet actually gave these responsibilities to the youth. And the youth took them on. And they applied them. And they achieved these results. Where you see someone ruling Mecca. And another one converting all of Medina. And another one being the military leader of an entire army of the Islamic world at its height. And so, on the one side, inshallah, may this serve as an important lesson for all of us. As youth, your potential is unlimited. Your religion tells you that you can achieve a lot more than what present-day culture is telling you you can achieve. Your religion has given tremendous power to the youth, tremendous responsibilities to the youth. This is for you as youth. And I think this is clear, inshallah, to all of you. The second message from all of this is also for us as communities, community leaders, community centers, people interested in helping the youth develop and grow. The youth can take on a lot more. They can take on responsibility. They have talents. They have abilities. They have fresh thoughts. They can take on a lot more. We have to make space for them and allow them to lead. And they will be able to lead. And I won't say more up to here. When we turn to Karbala, we all know that the followers of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, Imam al-Hussein was a universal call. And the people who followed him came from all walks of life. We spoke about Habib ibn Mudahir. Habib was a 75-year-old man. But the bulk of the followers of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam were the youth. The bulk of them, the majority of them. One of them was a young man. One of them was a young man, not mentioned by name in the Maqatil. History simply says that at some point, as the followers of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam were coming out one after the other, there is a young boy of Turkish descent who came out to fight. Unfortunately, we go too fast in the Maqatil. We don't mention a couple of details about him mentioned in the Maqatil. Our ulama, when they mention him, they say he is a young boy of Turkish descent, true. He came out to fight. Some of our ulama have said, وَكَانَ عَالِمًا, and he was a scholar, this young Turkish boy. Some say he was a slave of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. I don't think he was a slave of the Imam. I think he had come to live with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and Ahl al-Bayt to learn religion. Because he was a scholar, that's the indication. Al-Khawarizmi and others say he was an expert in the Arabic language, and his poetry proves it. And he was qari'an lil-Qur'an, which doesn't mean he recited the Qur'an, which means he had memorized the Qur'an. This is a young Turkish boy who came out to fight this way with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam without his parents present. He had accompanied the Imam, refusing to leave him. When he fought and he was killed, the Maqatil say Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam came, stood at his body and wept. And then Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam recited verses of the Qur'an, and then he lied down on the ground beside him and he put his cheek on his cheek. And the histories tell us the boy was dying at that time. He hadn't died yet. He smiled because Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had put his cheek on his cheek, and then he passed away. And another example of the youth of Karbala is the son of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, al-Qasim. His story is long. Al-Qasim is the orphan of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, who had grown up in the house of Imam al-Hussein, with the sons of Imam al-Hussein being like his older brothers. So on the 9th of Karbala, Imam al-Sajjad says Imam al-Hussein gave a lecture, a speech, a sermon, in which he explained to his companions how they would die. And he did not mention Al-Qasim. Al-Qasim looked to his uncle and he said, "What about me? Am I going to be martyred or not?" Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam says when he asked his uncle this, فَأَشْفَقَ عَلَيْهِ الْحُسَيْنِ. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had too much mercy to answer him directly. So instead he tested him. He told him, "My son, Qasim, how do you view death?" And he told him, "Sweeter than honey." And Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam only said, "Indeed, it is sweeter than honey." And he didn't say anything more. The next day, on the 10th of Muharram, the Maqatil mentioned that after all of the companions of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam were killed, his Ahl al-Bayt, his family members started to come out. The first one led by Ali al-Akbar. And then one or two at least of the sons of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, the older brothers of Al-Qasim. Al-Qasim is the youngest of the sons of Imam al-Hasan to fight under Imam al-Hussein. Imam al-Hasan lost other children in Karbala who were too young to fight. They were killed later. Al-Qasim comes to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, to his uncle, asking him to allow him to enter into the battle. The Maqatil say that at least twice Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam sent him back to his mother, telling him, "Your mother needs your protection. She will need a protector afterwards. Stay with your mother." In some Maqatil we are told he kept kissing the hands and the feet of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam until he allowed him. In other version of history, it is said that when he sent him back, he went crying to his mother, telling her, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam refuses to allow me to enter into the battle. His mother is Ramla, one of 2 or 3 names mentioned for her. Ramla went back to the things that she had inherited from Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, her husband. And she took out a will that he had left for Al-Qasim for just such a day. She gave it to Al-Qasim. It was sealed, he opened it. It simply said that this is from Al-Hasan ibn Ali to his son Al-Qasim. My son Qasim, if you ever see your uncle Hussein alone and without supporters and in grave difficulty, do not fall short in your support and aid of your uncle. That's it. He took the will and he came quickly to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam with a bright face. He gave the will to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Imam al-Hussein looked at the will. In one version of history, he turned to Medina. He saluted his brother. He said, Aba Muhammad, Akhi Aba Muhammad, you took care of us in your life and you continue to take care of us from behind the grave. In one version of history, he wiped the will on his eyes as a blessing because this is the handwriting of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. Then he told Al-Qasim, how am I to prevent you from performing the will of your father? Al-Khawarizmi says, and then they embraced and hugged and they both fell to the ground. And then Al-Qasim was allowed to enter after Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam put the turban of Imam al-Hasan on his head. Hamid ibn Muslim says when he entered the battlefield, there is a young boy who entered the battlefield, his face like the slice of a moon. He was wearing a shirt and pants and wearing 2 sandals in his feet. He's not wearing the attire of a warrior. He enters the battlefield this way and he recites verses of poetry saying, if you deny me, if you do not know who I am the young lion from Hassan, the grandson of the chosen truthful messenger. This is Hussein, like a captive between evil people. May God never allow them to taste the freshness of the water. Then he enters and he starts fighting. Al-Khawarizmi says he kills 35 warriors. And then afterwards, Hamid ibn Muslim, the narrator of Al-Maqtal, he says the string attached to his sandal, on his left foot got detached. And so he bent down and he started to fix it in the middle of the war, in the middle of the battle. He says the man standing beside me said, I swear that I want to hurt the heart of his uncle Hussein by killing him. He says, I told him, what is the matter with you? I swear to you that if he were to attack me, I wouldn't do anything. Look at him and look at those who are all around him. Are they not enough trying to kill him? He says, I will do it. And so he attacked Al-Qasim ibn al-Hasan in that moment while his head was down, and he hit him on his head, and the young boy fell to the ground crying out, Am ya Hussein, alayka minni salam. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam rushed to him. Hamid ibn Muslim says he went after the one who struck him on the head and he cut his arm off. And then the man, to escape from Imam al-Hussein, trying to run away, he fell and the horses of the enemy trampled his body and he died immediately there. And then he says a great cloud of dust emerged and we couldn't see anything, but I stood there to see what would happen next. And once the dust settled, I saw Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam standing on top of the body of Al-Qasim. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was weeping. Al-Qasim was lightly moving his feet. Imam al-Hussein told him, may God curse a people who did this to you. And may God curse a people who chose your grandfather and your father as their enemies. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you all patience, and we shall see each other in the afterlife. As the young man, Al-Qasim, leaves this world, and history says he was between 13 and 16 years old. When his soul departs from this world, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, Hamid ibn Muslim says, he tries to carry him. He puts his chest on his chest, and when he tries to get up, the Imam does not have enough energy to carry him fully. He says, so both his legs were dragging on the ground, and I wanted to see what he would do. He brought him into the same tent and lied him down beside the body of his young boy, Ali al-Akbar alayhi salam. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, assalamu ala al-Hussein, وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.
يا أبا صالح طال الانتظار، قم إلينا فعلينا الدهر يا مولاي جار، قم إلينا فيك قلب العاشق الواله حار، قم إلينا مولاي يا فرج الله. كم ندبنا بحزن واشتياق، كم ندبنا سنينا من فراق، قل متى سيدي يوم التلاقي. كم جرعنا المآسي والعذاب، قلبنا يا حبيب القلب ذاب، دونك العيش هم واغتراب، قم إلينا ضاقت الأرض بنا يا ابن السماء، مهدي يا نصير الأبرياء والضعفاء، مهدي ما لنا غيرك عون في البلاء، مهدي روحنا يا ملاذ الروح حيران، منك هيهات على الأوجاع صبرا، منك هبها على الأوجاع صبرا، أنت بالحال يا مولاي أدرى. يا أبا صالح سيدي روحنا الولهى فداك، دمع ندباتنا الجاري دعاك، فمتى سترانا ونراك؟